As by the friction of bamboos destruction takes place, so also at sunset, by the interaction of the faults of intoxication, all their minds became unbalanced and destruction took place. Purport. When there is a need for fire in the forest, by the will of the Supreme it takes place due to friction amongst bamboos. Similarly, the descendants of Yadu were all destroyed by the will of the Lord by the process of self-destruction. Just as there is no possibility of fires occurring deep in the forest due to human effort, so also there was no power in the universe could vanquish the descendants of the Yadu, who were protected by the Lord. The Lord wanted them to be so destroyed, and thus they obeyed his order, as indicated by the word Tanu Anu Kyata. So this Om Gyanati Mirandasya Jananjana Shalakya Chaksu Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Durgame Parimendasya Skalat Pachikatimuhu Sakripa Yustudani Nashantu Santu Vanam Vanam. I was just going to say here that this last line of the purport, as indicated by the word ta, nujak ta. So I was looking, we don't have that here, so it was in the previous verse that that Maharaj quoted yesterday, that he spoke about atate tadarukyata. So here it says tat by the Brahmanas, ayudata being permitted. So yesterday's translation was thereafter the descendants of Vishnu and Bhoja, being permitted by the Brahmanas, partook of the remnants of prasad and also drank liquor made of rice. By drinking they all become delirious, and bereft of knowledge they touch the cords of each other's heart with harsh words. So if you're wondering why I'm here to give class, it's not really because Shastra Chaksus is sick, it's because I'm the most qualified to give this because of my unfortunate experience with intoxication. So I'm very qualified to give this. So I put my hand up there, and I'm just a sign of how a wretched person can become a devotee of the Lord. So it's by the Lord's mercy that I'm here. So I could speak a little bit about this. It's a quite Krishna Kirtan said to me last night, when you want to give this, if you like to give the sloka, it said there's something that you'll understand, something down your alley, he said. I don't know what made him think that, but so we're talking about now, we've been discussing the Yadu dynasty. So the Yadu dynasty is all of Krishna's descendants who've been living in Dwarka, and over the years, of course, we know that Krishna lived in Dwarka for 100 years. So we know he had how many wives? 16,108 wives. They all had 10 sons and 1 daughter. So do the maths there. And then within 100 years, their sons also got married and they had sons. So Krishna had grandsons as well. So it was quite a prolific dynasty. What to speak of the other Yadus that he took, that he shifted from Mathura to Dwarka. I don't know how many there were there, but then also all the Yadus had so many servants, and there were so many maid servants and so many animals to be looked after, so many gardens, and so it was a thriving city. And that city had been under attack a lot of times. So actually the Yadus in that particular city of Dwarka, it was said that there were demigods. So right in the beginning, when the universe found out that Krishna was coming at the end of Dwapara Yuga, the call came out to assist Krishna in his pastimes. So the demigods, a lot of the demigods were very, very eager to assist Krishna, so they took birth in Dwarka. And their relationship with Krishna was with Krishna in his Vasudeva form, that he had his four-arm form, and he was their life and soul, and they worshipped him as such, and there was an air of camaraderie, but basically it was to do with awe and reverence. Even the wives of Krishna there, the 16,108 wives, are all goddesses of fortune, and the goddesses of fortune are always depicted as massaging the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, so that was the relationship of servitude in reverence. So Dwarka was existing like that, and at different times the demigods assisted Krishna in his pastime in vanquishing the demons, just like when Selva attacked Dwarka with his spaceship, which sometimes is depicted to look like a flying saucer. It was like a big city, and he was raining all sorts of weapons on Dwarka, and sometimes he'd disappear and appear somewhere else, and he was really besieging the city. So there was a big war between him and the Yadu dynasty, and there were other battles with Dantavakra and so on and so forth. So the Yadus, they actually triumphed throughout all of this, and they become very, very strong as Kshatriyas. So they were pretty much invincible, and after such a period of time, they were sort of enjoying their invincibility, and they become a little bit proud. So Krishna actually noticed that, and right towards the end there, when the demigods came, Lord Brahma came to thank Lord Krishna for his effort in vanquishing all the demons and re-establishing the order of the earth. Of course, Krishna accepted that boon from Lord Brahma, actually said to him, "I'll visit you on my way back," because his pastimes were just about to conclude. But then there was the problem of the others, because even though order had been restored within the Bharatvash, within the world, and everything was going nicely, he understood that after he'd leave, that the Yadu dynasty was very eager to sort of, as an army, and an army was eager to exert its prowess, and there was going to be a disturbance there. So Krishna arranged the fact that all these ominous signs started to happen over Dwarka, all these comets and little mini earthquakes or whatever. And he explained to the Yadu dynasty there that we've been cursed by the Brahmins. So we just heard about that, how but this is an example of the precociousness of the Yadus, that they come up to the sages and try to play a trick, a really lame trick. Just this lady's going to give birth. Is it a boy or a girl? And it backfired on them. The sages cursed them. So Krishna is saying, because of the curse of the sages, all these bad things that happen in Dwarka, you'd better leave, and we'll go to some holy places. So inauspicious omens and so forth and so on. So all the old folk like me, and the women and the children, they were all sent to Shankodara, which is a place, a holy place, and the Kshatriyas went to Prabhaschetra, which is a place of pilgrimage on the river Saraswati. So they all left Dwarka, and it explained here that they had to leave Dwarka because these Yadus, they were Kshatriyas, but they were demigods, were Kshatriyas, but they were demigods had come down to help Krishna's pastimes, and they weren't really ready to go back to the spiritual world, because they still had some material desires, and they still had their functions to perform, their roles, their duties as demigods. They just come down to assist Krishna in his pastimes. And if anybody passed away in Dwarka, they would immediately go back to the spiritual world. So it's the same in Vrindavan also. So Vrindavan is like that, or Mayapur, that if you pass away in these holy dhams, you go back to the spiritual world. The difference between Vrindavan and Dwarka was that the residents of Vrindavan weren't demigods; they were pure devotees. Some of them had, some of them Nitya Siddhas that had come from the spiritual world to assist Krishna in his pastime. Uddhava was such a person, and others were purified souls that have gone through the process of bhakti and made that complete transition where they were completely in having unalloyed and unmotivated desires to surrender to Lord Krishna, and they were pure at heart, so they took birth in Vrindavan to associate with Krishna in his pastimes. So all these souls, they went back to Godhead. So all these Kshatriyas, they took boats, they went to the shores, and they rode chariots to this holy place of Prabhav Kshetra. So just at this point, just like to mention that Uddhava, who was like Krishna's minder right from the beginning. If we trace Uddhava back, so he was a liberated soul, and he was Krishna's cousin, and he actually looked like Krishna. So Krishna sent him, when he was in Mathura, before Dwarka, he sent Uddhava to console the gopis, because he knew he was about the only one who could do so. He sent him certain letters. He was very intelligent in his way. He dealt with all the residents of Vrindavan, and Uddhava was astounded to see that bhakti that the residents felt for Krishna, that unalloyed love and emotion. And he spoke with the elderly cowherd men, cowherd ladies, and then he spoke with the cowherd boys, and then he spoke with the gopis. And they were all pacified, because when they saw Uddhava, he reminded them of Krishna. So that was that set of circumstances. Then in Dwarka, Uddhava also tried to ease Krishna's pain of separation from the gopis by arranging certain pastimes. So he was always there. He was Krishna's messenger. So Uddhava couldn't bear the fact that Krishna was going to leave. So all the Kshatriyas that went to Prabhav Kshetra, they were there out of destiny, to fulfill the destiny that they were, that somehow or other the Yadu dynasty had to disappear somewhere along the line. They couldn't stay after Krishna left. But a lot of the sages, they stayed behind, they didn't go. So Uddhava asked if he could go with Krishna, but Krishna sent him in another direction. He sent him to Naimisharanya, where ultimately, after witnessing the events that took place, Uddhava went to Naimisharanya and he met up with Vidura, and this conversation took place. It's been going for a few chapters, where Vidura had no knowledge of what transpired in the last 36 years, because he'd been on pilgrimage and be totally unaware of any news that was coming. So Uddhava was filling in the news for him. So this is right at the end, where he's speaking about what finally happened, what the last events were. So then after the raiding pastimes, Uddhava wanted to receive, Vidura. He wanted to receive instructions from Uddhava, but Uddhava felt like, because he was younger than Vidura, he said, no, you go and see Maitreya. But if you read the 11th canto, which is very, very interesting from chapter 30 onwards, Krishna gives explicit instructions to Uddhava. So all those instructions are there in the Srimad Bhagavatam there, written down by Srila Vyasadeva. And Uddhava's also produced a book, I believe, it's Uddhava Gita, is it? Yeah. So Uddhava also had literature, so he's very prolific in the history of the devotees of the Lord. So a little bit of Uddhava. So today we come to today's sloka. As by the friction of bamboos destruction takes place, so also at sunset by the interaction of the faults of intoxication all their minds became unbalanced and destruction took place. So this is Uddhava's story to Vidura. So we're talking about friction of bamboos in a forest of dry wind. So getting back to reality there, we don't have many bamboos, but sometimes we see in the dry sun that there's a sort of rubbing of two branches together. In Australia in particular, we have a different set of circumstances. We have the eucalypts, and then when it's very, very warm, the oil from the eucalypt trees, the oil ignites and a bushfire starts in the middle of the country somewhere where you can't reach. We had one very close to us about 4 years ago, just started up at the top of the hills. Nobody started it. Might have been a lightning strike, or it just might have been the action of the trees, just a friction within the trees. So that is a natural occurrence. So, in this case, I just wanted to mention the fact that sometimes when it's a bit of a squirrel, we've got a bit of time to fill out, we talk about fires. So we used to hear about how you rub two sticks together and you get a fire to happen. I don't know if it's in Australia or anywhere else how that happens. Has anybody actually tried that? Rub two sticks together and try? Huh? It works. You have to have straw ready, and you sort of get a spark and you blow on it. It's a big endeavour, isn't it?
It works.
Oh, that's nice. Good to hear. I always thought it is. I have never sort of been successful at it. I think I've tried once or twice. So in the Vedic times, that's why a fire was so important, that the Brahmanas would always keep a fire in their house. And that was one duty that was performed by the family members, the wife of the Brahmin and the children or the disciples, that they would get firewood for the house, they would collect firewood, and the fire would always be burning, because a Brahmin and a fire was synonymous. First of all, that the Brahmin would cook his own meals. And secondly, there were so many hotras and sacrifices and performances that involved mantras that involved the process of a fire ceremony. So that was just a little bit of information here. So the bamboo sticks rubbing together and the friction. So the comparison here is the bamboo sticks are with the Yadu dynasty, right? And they're all the proud Kshatriyas that assembled there to perform the ritualistic ceremonies. They were in Prabhav Kshetra. I don't know if anybody's been to Prabhav Kshetra, but there's Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj glorifies that place. There was Vidananda Maharaj in his purple in 11th canto. There's about 2 pages spent on that one, that it's a very auspicious place, that there were so many pastimes before in that, and it's on the banks of the river Saraswati, so it's a very, very holy place. So they were assembled there, that performed all the rituals, and that fed the Brahmanas, and they're given in charity so munificently. So this was to counteract because Krishna explained that you've been cursed, the other dynasty been cursed by the Brahmins, so many inauspicious signs, so we'll go and perform this sacrifice by Prabhu Kshetra. It was almost like setting up the arena for the theatre of what was to happen, because at Prabhu Kshetra, that's where the reeds ended up, those little iron filings that got thrown in the sea, that got washed down the river, down the Saraswati, and they're on the banks of the river there, and they grow sort of big tall reeds. They were there, and after, it's described here, after the big sacrifices, it was time to honour the prasadam that the Brahmins had offered the sacrifices to the demigods, and also accompanied with that was big vats of liquor. So now we get to the substance of the matter. Here is the liquor. So I would have liked to have spoken about Uddhava's instructions or Krishna's instructions to Uddhava in the 10th canto, but I didn't get a chance. But I do know a little bit about liquor, so I can talk about that and its disastrous effects. So anyway, in the sloka here, it says here, may rare intoxication. So it was a very, very light intoxicant that was there in ample quantities for all the Kshatriyas to sample. So in Dwarka, it was understood that all the regular principles were being followed there, so there was no intoxications there. But we know that for the Kshatriyas there is some license that there can be some intoxications due to their nature. It's not like we emulate or copy the mood or spirit of the Kshatriyas here. We just Vaishnava, servants of the Lord Krishna. We don't purport to be Kiba Vipra, Kibra Nasi, Kiba Sudra, Kimya. So Lord Chaitanya explains that we're none of these things, we're just a servant of the servant of the servant. So in days of yore, the Kshatriyas used to drink some intoxication of alcohol, so that was there. And of course they weren't used to drinking alcohol, being Yadus and being with Krishna, and of course being ecstatic in his association. This was something new upon them. So at this point in time, I'd like to say that there is three classes of intelligence. We all know this, that the first class intelligent person, he will hear about the effects of something like the intoxications or gambling or meat eating or illicit sex, and he'll see the faults in it and hear from the sources about how it is harmful to one's spiritual life, and that's enough. He'll refrain from doing these activities. That's first class intelligence. Just hearing about it is enough. That's okay, I've heard about it from higher sources, I don't need to take part in it. Second one is that, well, let's try it and see how it goes. You know, just out of curiosity. And then there's some implications, and after weighing up the good effect and the bad effect, that actually it's not really worth trying, that the sages were right, that the Shastras were right, and then they desist. Third class intelligence is that one keeps trying again and again to try enjoy the process of the material abundance of the material world, and the intoxications and everything else that goes with it, the intoxications, illicit sex, gambling, meat eating, it's all there. And the warning signs are there of karmic reactions to all of these, and they all lead to distress, that there is bad karmic reaction, and there's not only karmic reaction, but there's also a bad effect, just like alcohol, like intoxications, alcoholism, that leads to violence on so many fronts. breaks up marriages. We see this all the time. With our friends, even sometimes our relatives, and it creates violence amongst our society, and it's sometimes unprovoked, and so people don't feel safe. And it's a huge problem. Intoxication in this government is huge. But then at the same time the government taxes it heavily, so this is where they get their funds from. So it's a real sort of enigma that has occurred here. So actions and reactions. So first class intelligence. We had a play once, I don't know if any of you saw it here, we did it 3 years ago. It was our first play of the New Govardhana actors. It was called Ratnakara. It was about Valmiki, right? We had some actors in it, and we had Krishna Balaram, Prabhu, playing the part of the intoxicated merchant. So this is an example of first-class intelligence that Krishna Balaram said, I've never been intoxicated in my life. How do I act? Right? So this is where I came in. I was the expert in that sort of field. So I said, well, you get the wheelbarrow, right? And you just let the wheelbarrow take you wherever you want to go, right? So he did a beautiful job of it. It was an act. He acted out like an intoxication person, but he'd never been intoxicated in his life. So the wheelbarrows go here and there, crashed into Lalanath and into Ramai Maharaj, and goes here and there and falls over, laughing. And so this is the process of intoxication. It's like that's the reality that happens. In real life, you become intoxicated, you become inebriated, you could be on a skateboard, on a bike, or just even walking, running, and you fall over and everything becomes scattered, and you're laughing, you fall in the water, you fall in the mud, and you're laughing, you're rolling around, you pick yourself up, fall over again, and then you get home and you're all dishevelled, and somebody says, what happened to you? Right? You sort of look at it. But the next day you can't remember anything. Right? It's just a hangover. You don't know what you did. And then people explain it to you. And then there's a sort of the shame and all of that. So that's the process of intoxication. It's said that there's a saying that lights on but nobody home. Right? So what happens, of course, is that over a period of time, when one begins taking intoxication, his intelligence becomes anesthetized. So the mind completely, without the intelligence, the mind just listens to the senses, and without the intelligence, irrational decisions are made. Anger is never too far away, and then the false ego, just when the false ego flares up, then anger and false ego go hand in hand together. So it's like the animal instinct that kicks in with there's eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Of course, that animal instinct of trying to defend. Sometimes we wonder what defending means. We know eating, we know sleeping, we know mating, but what is defending? So that propensity is there in its gross form when the false ego becomes prominent. Sometimes it's called false bravado. And when we see that in action, it's actually very, very embarrassing to see in people. So the Yadus, they had permission to take food, and then they started drinking what was very light wine. It's described, light liquor beverage. But because the Kshatriyas, sometimes we see people with bigger bodies, they can drink copious quantities of sort of liquor, and somewhere at some point in time, there's a transition where you go from happiness to the process of complete intoxication, and then you don't even notice that effect taking place. So then all the symptoms start to come out from within. It's like we said here, all the harsh words, the false ego, and then you're blinded by rage, and then you're all in, right? So this is exactly what occurred with the Yadu dynasty there, that, you know, the millions of soldiers there, they all took this wine, they all had the same effect, and then they start to insult each other and take teams to all these different dynasties there. So how dare you insult my clan, and this is what I think of you. And they took up these reeds, and it said when they pulled the reeds out of the ground, they became iron rods in their hand, and then they started whacking each other. In fact, they were so intoxicated, it said that Bhagavatam says that they saw Krishna and they became angry at Krishna too, and they start to attack Krishna and Balaram, and Krishna and Balaram had to take part in this, and of course that was the end of the dynasty. So that's how it happened. So I suppose the lesson that we take from this is it's all about false ego, that, you know, sometimes we can blame the intoxicants as being the stimulants for us not being our real, us being out of character or whatever. But there are many other aspects besides intoxication that can bring this on. So we always have the dangers of fame, adoration and distinction, that sometimes if we become proud of our different attributes that we have, we see that we develop this false identity that we are very distinguished personalities, and we do not give credit to Krishna for that ability that he's given us. We may be a great actor, great singer, great dancer, or very great artist, or just very capable person, may be able to influence people and be a great leader. And because of that, we get some material pride out of it, and we want more. And then we get carried away. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur actually states, he said, mind, what sort of devotee are you? I don't know much more. It's what goes with the saying, but that's just enough in its own way. You know, we just sort of check where we're at, where our mind is taking us. Are we becoming tools for Krishna? Are we? Because it's that is the essence of our life here. Krishna, what do you want me to do? I will do what you like me to do because I'm your servant. And to understand that aspect is we have to know that Krishna, he's the proprietor of everything. That actually it's all is. We're using his energy. Just if we're in someone's house, we always ask permission. Oh, can I use your blender to make an orange juice, or can I have some here, or do you have a glass of water? We always ask for permission. We're thankful. So if we have this consciousness on a big scale, then we have things in perspective. We are in a very, very harmonious situation with the Supreme. So there is always the false ego and the real ego. So we're looking to see what the ego is. The ego is always there. Some people say, well, some philosophies say, well, ego is false, so we have to get rid of the ego. But no, if false ego means that there's a real ego as well. The ego is always there. And real ego means that we actually understand that the ego that we have in our body is also related to that spiritual spark that is there. Not only us, but Krishna is there with us. So we look for that harmony, look for that real identity and relationship with Krishna. And this is how we find ourselves. It's called the science of self-realization. So it's nice to hear stories from the Bhagavatam just to see the pitfalls that sometimes occur. So the Bhagavatam speaks about this. It speaks about the glories of Krishna, but also speaks about the trials and tribulations of the devotees of Krishna, and it is a learning experience for us. And it is the way forward for us to actually attain self-realization by just reading Bhagavatam constantly and discussing it with devotees. So that is my take on the sloka today. And I won't read it again, it's a pretty heavy sloka, but has anybody got any questions or comments? I will read it again. As by friction of bamboos destruction takes place, so also at the sunset by direction of faults of intoxication, all their minds become embellished and destruction took place. Anybody want to say anything? 3 people here. Thank you very much, one and all. Joy. All glory to Prabhupada.